and welcome to the second day of the 30-day Yoga Asana challenge. Today the asana or yoga posture that we're going to think about will be downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Downward dog is possibly the best known yoga posture within and outside of yoga. It often turns up in Pilates practices and even in fitness practices. It's really one of the great cornerstone asana of the yoga practice, and it occurs as a posture both in its own right, but also very frequently as a posture that's used for transitions from one posture to another, or within transitioning sequences, so flow sequences. But also it's used frequently as a counter pose, in other words, a practice that helps the body to release the effects of another strong posture, a strong twist for example, or a strong back bend, in order to neutralize the effects of that posture. Downward dog is often just a very useful catch penny, in a sense, counter pose. However, we really shouldn't lose sight of downward dog as a very important, interesting and spiritually significant practice in its own right. The downward facing dog posture contains a lot of psychoenergetic energy, this spiritual energy that connects with our psychology, that yoga is very aware of. Yoga philosophy is very aware of it, and this awareness carries through into the postures that we practice. Downward dog brings the awareness very much inwards. It tends to be that the perception of our inner space, the space within that length and breadth and depth, the space that is the body, becomes magnified in downward facing dog. If during the practice of downward dog one simply takes one's mind into the body space, one may have a sense of vastness on the inside. And this is a huge resource that we're often not aware of the fact that we have. It helps us to understand the depth of resources, mental, within our consciousness, within our spirits, that we can call on in many situations in our lives. At the same time, of course, this ability to connect with the inner space with such great clarity signifies that we have detached from the external physical world that surrounds us, of the different stresses that are contained within that world, the demands that are placed upon us, and the need that we feel, and often rightly so, that we must conform to what's expected of us. We need to, though, within all of these different demands, we need to live with others, we need to live in our societies. Of course we have to learn how to cooperate, but at the same time we need very much to be able to be ourselves, to know who we are, and to act from out of a sense of self. And I think downward dog enables us to get a really clear connection with our pure self, when we're not being pushed and pulled, when we are not under a sense of obligation in any way. We have a rest from those things, and when we return to them, perhaps we return to them with a sense of greater inner space, a sense of greater inner strength, just a sense of being more centered. In another way, downward dog is a very strongly energetic posture, working with the pranic energy, the life energies, because it releases a direct channel through the spine. The spine is elevated at the tailbone, and through gravity it's lengthening and releasing all the way through to the crown of the head. And this means that all the different energies of the spine are being released or stimulated, or allowed, enabled to flow. And certainly all the energies of the chakras, the psychoenergetic centers that yoga believes to be within the body and around the body, will be able to flow freely here. The breath part of the pranic energy as well is really stimulated. The exhalation is very much lengthened in Adho Mukha Svanasana. And when the exhalation is deliberately lengthened by a practice, the inhalation occurs as a natural reaction to that. So the inhalation will also be stimulated and enlivened. And this element in the downward dog of the breath working quite hard is one of the reasons why the posture, why this practice tends to be potentially quite tiring, especially when we're first undertaking the practice of Adho Mukha Svanasana. Even if we've been practicing it for a long time, sustained holds within downward dog will of course become tiring. There's a physical demand as well through the posture. There's a lot of upper body strength that is needed in order to sustain the downward dog posture. Upper back strength, shoulder strength, tricep strength through the outside of the upper arm. And a great deal of core strength is needed as well to support the spine in this inverted position. And yet, sometimes downward facing dog is spoken of as a resting posture. And for those of us who are well familiar with downward dog, we will feel a resonance when we hear that. Although we know it's a posture in which hard work is required, but often for beginners, this idea that downward dog is a resting posture is really incomprehensible. Downward dog is a resting posture really from the perspective that I've just described, that it allows the mind to rest. It allows our engagement with the world to be at rest. It opens up the intuitive centers of the body and of the physiology and of the mind. I think that Adho Mukha Svanasana is one of the really best examples that we have in the well-known canon of yoga postures of the principle that yoga postures contain both strength and softness. And this concept has been handed down to us. It will have been in existence long before Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras, which were put down in writing somewhere between 300 BC and 300 AD, according to the European calendar. What Patanjali writes is Stira Sukham Asanam. And stira means strength, focus, steadfastness. And sukham is openness, ease, happiness. And then asanam or asana, as was discussed in the first day of the challenge, means essentially to be in a state of sitting. So the yoga asana combines strength and softness so that it's as if we are sufficiently at our ease to be in sitting, but also if we are sitting well, we have a certain amount of strength that we need to work with as well. With downward dog, it becomes a resting posture at that point when we're able to balance both our strength and our openness. And this is very key to the practice of yoga as a whole. What we experience through our bodies, we will experience through our minds and through our psyches. So if our body knows how to balance strength and ease, then our mind will also gradually come to understand. It's not like a direct process of learning with words and knowledge being fed in terms of facts. It's a kind of learning that happens really indirectly, a sort of osmosis that occurs. And it's part of the life-changing aspect of yoga. It's part of why when we practice a yoga posture, the effects will be different from when we just practice a stretch. So we connect with many elements and dimensions of our bodies, the energies within our bodies, and the way in which those energies within our bodies are reflected in the world that surrounds us. We are both in the universe and of the universe, and the universe is both within us and everywhere. It's the microcosm and the macrocosm, which are concepts that have been in Europe for a long time, since 1800s for sure. So yes, Adho Mukha Svanasana, the posture that we're going to look at today. We'll begin with a practice route. We'll think a little bit about the deep inner strengths that we need within the posture in order to support the spine when we're in the downward facing dog, and then we'll gradually come into practicing the posture. To begin with, we're going to come through onto the mat. I have with me a towel or a cloth or a scarf that you can use perhaps to hold on to, or alternatively, if you have a yoga strap, that will be useful. And I have a yoga block, you know, a book or a cushion, maybe just as useful if you haven't got a yoga block. So let's come onto the back. We'll first of all align the body, and then we're going to begin to think about opening up the shoulder joints. And actually, I think I'm going to come onto the mat from the other side. So rolling down through the spine, letting the spine lengthen out as much as possible as you roll through towards the floor. Then let's just space the spine out a little bit. So lifting the hips up and bringing the weight of the pelvis back towards the mat, balancing the weight out right side, left side. And then let's lift the ribs up and lengthen the spine and the waist out of the hips and bringing the ribs back down towards the mat, balancing the weight out right side, left side, and also through the shoulders, balancing the weight out. And then we're going to bring the hands in towards the back of the head to support the head as we let the head lift away from the floor, and then lengthening from between the shoulder blades through to the crown of the head, bringing the head back onto the mat. As well, let's align the legs with the hips so that the lower body is aligned with the rest of the body. And we're going to put the feet at 2 fist distance apart approximately, so we can do that by feel, or we can always bring our feet together and then let the toes move outwards, keeping the heels together, and bring the heels in line with the toes after that. Then we're going to either take the yoga strap so that we're holding the strap with both hands at a width where the insides of the arms are in contact with the rib cage, or it's entirely possible to hold anything else that just allows us to hold the arms on track with the shoulder joints. That's all we're trying to do, to keep the arms aligned with the shoulder joints with what we're holding. This practice is going to involve, on the inhalation, letting both arms lift up, holding the strap or the towel between the hands. And then once the arms are at right angles to the floor, just breathing out to let the weight of the arms relax down into the shoulder sockets, to broaden out across the upper back and across the shoulders. And then as we're ready again with the inhalation, allowing the arms to begin to move backwards a little bit further, letting the shoulder blades stay nice and wide in the back of the rib cage, trying to keep them moving downwards towards the sitting bones as the arms travel back. Then we're going to breathe out here, really relaxing your whole spine into the mat as much as possible, and then breathing in again in this position, and as you're ready, on the exhalation, letting your arms come back to the original starting position. The aim here is to release the muscles between the arm and the chest, between the arms and the rib cage. So on the inside of the arm into the front of the chest, and sort of from underneath the arm into the sides of the rib cage. And in order for muscles to stretch, they need to be relatively relaxed. So the idea is that we let the arms travel softly and gently. Breathing in, the arms come to upright. Breathing out, the arms relax down into the shoulder joints, broadening the shoulders and the upper back into the mat. As we inhale again, keeping the movement of the arms gently. Working so that as the arms travel back, we might be able to feel the muscles opening up between the ribs and the sides of the chest,
and over the front of the chest. Exhaling here, checking that our spine from the base of the neck towards the tailbone is still grounded in the mat. And then again, breathing in lots of space, opening space from within the chest, using the breath. And then again, on the exhalation, the arms coming back through to the starting position. We're going to just work this through twice more. So, letting the arms move lightly. Our arms are really quite light. We often move them as though they're very heavy, but they aren't. Just let them be really light. So, inhalation to upright, and exhalation to let the weight of the arms sink down into the shoulder joints, feeling that our whole spine from the base of the neck to the tailbone is engaged with the mat. And then the next inhalation, letting the arms travel back again a little bit more. Exhalation here to relax the back, and then breathing in from the inside, using the breath, feeling that it's possible to open the muscles around the chest between the ribs. And then again an exhalation to bring the arms back and towards the sides. One last round. Inhalation, arms lifting. Exhalation, releasing the arms down into the shoulder joints, relaxing the upper back. Inhalation, the arms travel back. Exhalation, again, relaxing the back into the mat, keeping the shoulder blades wide. Try to keep them anchoring down the back as much as possible. Inhalation again here. And then again on the exhalation, letting the arms come through to the sides, letting go of your strap or your towel or whatever you've been holding, and we'll let the arms roll outwards from the shoulder joints, elbows and the backs of the hands coming to the mat, and for a few moments just allowing the shoulders to absorb that opening and releasing that we've been doing. We're going to come now into something called a bandha activating practice. The bandha are energy locks that yoga understands to be possible to apply within the body. And these yoga locks help to hold the energy of our yoga practice within the body. So the yoga practices tend to stimulate life energy, and rather than allowing that to dissipate, we use the bandha to help us keep the energy within. We may or we may not feel the effects of the bandha when we're practicing. That's not really something to worry about. As our practice deepens and we get more used to yoga, we may begin to feel the effects of the bandha. They're really quite subtle, I think, the effects of the bandha. In the meantime, in part because of the way that the bandha help to lock the energy within the body, what they're often doing is supporting the spine. And so when we can use the bandha in our practices, it often helps us to support the spine better. So often it makes our practice safer. And also it enables us to structure the posture more readily. And in the practice of Adho Mukha Svanasana, the bandha are quite key, and they really are very helpful and useful for structuring the full posture. And without them, it's very hard to structure the posture well. So we're going to think about the bandha now. Well, two of the bandha really mainly. There are three. We're going to think about the first bandha, which essentially is at the base of the spine, the Mula Bandha. And to begin that, just lying where we are at present, we're going to think about, on the exhalations, drawing the lower abdomen down and back, just above the pubic bone. So with the exhalations from just right above the pubic bone, let the lower abdomen draw down and back. And with the inhalations, we're going to aim to maintain that depression. And with each exhalation, in a gentle way, see if it's possible to intensify that hollowing in the lower abdomen. Sometimes when we're engaging in the lower abdomen, the legs take up quite a bit of tension at the hip joints. And when I was first doing that, I just had this little practice of wobbling my legs gently at the hip joints to discourage that tension going into the hip joints, which is the hip flexors activating in conjunction with the lower abdominal muscles. But it's not helpful for us for the hip flexors to activate with the bandha mostly, and so we try to already detach from that potential conjunction of movements there. Also, as part of Mula Bandha, we might think in terms of getting a lift from in the muscles directly in front of the tailbone, directly above the tailbone in the position that we're lying in at the moment. And that's just a gentle lift in the muscles directly above the tailbone. Again, we're aiming to isolate into these muscles rather than switch on the bottom and switch on the hip joints. It may be that despite trying very hard, the hip joints and the gluteal muscles persistently switch on when we're trying to isolate, either into the lower abdomen and, or if we feel ready, adding in the lift at the tailbone. And it's something simply not to worry about. Just allow the body to find its own way. If the brain keeps sending the message through to the lower abdomen and towards the base of the spine that it would like these engagements to happen without other muscles working at the same time, the body will gradually get used to how it needs to interpret that message in order to succeed in what the brain is asking it to do. It's just a question of keep practicing. The body is very cooperative usually with the brain. It just needs a little bit of time sometimes to find the right pathways. So that's our Mula Bandha. We can go on holding a gentle Mula Bandha in the lower abdomen and in the muscles above the tailbone if we feel comfortable, as we proceed to activating the Uddiyana Bandha in the midsection, or if we feel ready to relax the Mula Bandha, we just let it go for the time being. We'll come back to it in a moment. So for the Uddiyana Bandha, the first thing to try and do is to, with the exhalations, draw the navel back towards the spine. It's as if we're trying to draw the navel back to touch the spine. It won't, but it's that idea. And with the inhalations, we're going to try to hold on to this drawing down and back in the center of the midsection. If we feel strong enough, then we're going to draw the navel down and back, but also hook it up towards the diaphragm. So this is much, much stronger. You could probably see my body react as I did that, navel pulling down towards the spine, hooking up towards the diaphragm. And then again, with the inhalation, still trying to hold this engagement in the midsection. That can be with Uddiyana Bandha as well, that the legs take up a little bit of work. Just checking in again with the legs that they're not doing that. So again, we let both bandha relax for a moment and just check that our feet are still more or less at that 2 fist distance apart and our shin bones pretty much upright to the floor. And we're going to come into a practice called Dvipadapitam, the two-legged temple, although more usually referred to as the bridge. And in this practice, we're going to work with the bandha as our primary strength. And the Dvipadapitam is a rolling of the spine away from the mat. And it really is the spine that we're trying to lift up. We're trying to find the strength closest to the spine that will help us support the spine away from the floor. And we try to use the deep hollow in the lower abdomen and lift at the tailbone to begin the movement. The navel pulling to the spine and potentially hooking up towards the diaphragm. And then to help us as well, we're going to need to get lots of strength in across the back of the waist, using the back muscles like a girder of strength to support the spine. So that's on the exhalation that we are rolling up initially, and then breathing in the posture, and then as we're ready on the exhalation, rolling the spine back through towards the mat, and then just breathing in, allowing the body to relax here. So once again, with an exhalation, activating the bandha, a nice deep lift at the base of the spine, hollowing in the lower abdomen, We might take that hollowing wide as well towards the crests of the hip bones to help us lift into the Dvipadipittam. Navel pulling to the spine and potentially hooking up towards the diaphragm. And then at the same time bringing lots of strength in around the sides of the waist, squeezing them in towards the spine, and at the back of the waist, squeezing our back strength in towards the spine. And the muscles around the rib cage can help us as well. The sides of the ribs gathering in towards the spine, and the back of the ribs pulling in towards the spine. So the trunk strength is really centering towards our spine. Breathing in here in the posture, keeping the navel pulling to the spine. And then as we're ready again on the exhalation, rolling down through the spine segment by segment with control. Breathing in to release the spine. So we're going to practice the Dvipadipittam twice more. And again, it really is this idea of lifting and supporting the spine away from the mat, rather than pushing and hoisting the hips off the mat with the spine passively following. Let the muscles that directly support the spine, and also by the engagement of the bandha, roll the spine away from the mat. Trying to create a long line from the crown of the head right through the spine towards the tailbone. Lots of strength in the trunk. Inhalation and Dvipadipittam. And as you're ready again for exhalation, to roll right back down. So again, the bandha are very key. Navel pulling to the spine, powerful hollow in the lower abdomen, and lifting the muscles directly above the tailbone to this controlled return to the mat. So breathing in here again, and one last time, the deep lift at the base of the spine, hollowing in the lower abdomen, navel pulls to the spine, potentially hooks up, trying to find the rest of the strength from around the waist and around the rib cage. A long line through the spine, from the crown, stretching the tailbone as if towards the knees. And inhalation once we're in the posture. And then once again, on the exhalation, rolling the spine back towards the mat, really spacing it out all the way through to the floor. And then again, as you've returned to the mat, inhaling and relaxing and letting go. Let's slide the legs away from us after that quite actually challenging practice, and letting the knees and the toes roll outwards a little bit. We'll sort of let the legs flop in and out, and you can let the arms flop in and out, and just gently releasing hips and shoulders as well. We're going to move on now to opening the backs of the legs, which will again be a key aspect of preparation for the downward dog posture that we're going to come into. And this is a moving practice. It's a Vinyasa practice, opening the back of the leg. It's a version of Supta Padangusthasana, supine leg stretch. And it works again with the arms flowing the way we've already practiced in the first exercise. So the arms are going to, with the inhalation, lift to upright. And then let's bring the right leg in towards the abdomen, sinking the right thigh towards the abdomen, at the same time as sinking the arms into the shoulder joints. Then with the next inhalation, the arms are going to flow back as far as is comfortable, keeping the spine and the upper spine in contact with the mat. And then with the next exhalation, engaging the bandha in the lower abdomen and extending up into the right leg. Let's breathe in here and create as much space as we can all through the body in the posture. And then on the exhalation, folding the leg back in and down, bringing the foot to the floor and allowing the arms to return to the mat. Left side. Inhalation brings the arms to upright. Exhalation, the left leg comes in and towards the abdomen and the arms sink into the shoulder joints. Inhalation, the arms travel back, letting the spine stay in contact with the mat. Exhalation, engaging the bandha, so the lift at the base of the spine, hollow in the lower abdomen, navel pulling to the spine, and extending on through into the left leg. And inhalation here, Just looking for as much space in the body as you can, in the posture, space through the spine and through the ribs, through the back of the leg. And then again, on the exhalation, folding the leg down, replacing the foot to the mat, and the arms coming back to the sides. We're going to work this through twice more to each side. Inhalation to let the arms lift up. Exhalation to bring the right leg into the abdomen, to sink the arms into the shoulder joints and relax the spine into the mat. Inhalation to let the arms drift back comfortably. Exhalation to engage the bandha at the base of the spine and in the lower abdomen as we extend up into the right leg. Aim to really keep the back of the hips in contact with the mat, the tailbone down if possible. And then an inhalation here to really live the posture, breathe the posture, be the posture. And then again an exhalation to fold the leg back to the mat, to bring the arms through to the sides. Inhalation to let the arms lift up again. And then as we're ready, the left leg on the exhalation comes in towards the abdomen. The inhalation lets the arms travel back. The exhalation activates the bandha and also opens the left leg upwards. Breathing out here. Breathing in again, to find lots of space all through the body. And then once again, on the exhalation, relaxing the leg down, relaxing the arms to the sides. So right side again, inhalation to let the arms lift to upright. Exhalation to sink the arms into the shoulder joints and to bring the right leg forwards and towards us. Inhalation to let the arms travel back, keeping our spine in contact with the mat. Exhalation to engage the bandha and extend up into the right leg. Inhalation to again really open the posture with the breath, to really energize the whole of the body, which is the posture in the inhalation. And then again, exhalation to fold the leg in and towards us and to bring the arms back and towards the sides. Once again, inhalation to let the arms lift to upright. Exhalation to bring the left leg in and towards us and to sink the arms into the shoulder joints. Inhalation to let the arms travel back, still keeping the spine through the back of the ribcage in contact with the mat. Then as we're ready again, exhalation, engaging the bandha and extending up into the left leg. Inhalation here to create lots of space everywhere through the body. And then once again on the exhalation, the arms and the leg come back to the starting positions. And again, just giving ourselves a moment here to absorb that practice. Letting the breath settle again and just simply relax into an easy, natural rhythm. And then before we come up to standing, I'm going to mobilize the feet and ankles a little bit in preparation for our main posture. You can bring the thighs in towards us, just holding underneath the backs of the knees, and then letting the feet make circles at the ankles, as wide a range of movement as you possibly can here, and then reversing the circling of the ankles. And again, just as wide a comfortable range of movement as you can. Just work through our last couple of circling actions. And then allowing the feet and ankles just to relax. From here, we're going to bring ourselves around towards the all fours. So just gently coming through. Sometimes in the all fours, people find that their knees feel a little bit uncomfortable, and the best thing probably in that case to do is to bring just a folded towel or cloth in underneath the knees to
take the pressure off the knees. With the all fours, and most practices in the all fours, it's important that the spine is quite long, and that's often difficult to gauge. So what I do in order to check that the spine is long and stretched between the columns of the thighs and the pillars of the arms is to reach the hips back and towards the heels, really letting the spine lengthen out. So the tailbone aims as if it's going to touch the wall behind, and the crown of the head reaching forwards so it's going to touch the wall in front. That helps to really lengthen the spine out and allows us to get a good spacing then for the all fours as we come back forwards again. I need to just bring my hands back a little bit because my wrists are slightly ahead of my shoulder joints, which won't help the practice. In the all fours, we are going to work again with the bandha, so the lift in the lower abdomen, and if we can, adding in that lift in the muscles directly in front of the tailbone, just checking in that we're still easy in the depth of the hip joints here, that the legs aren't relaxed from the inside of the hip joint down towards the inside of the knee. And we're also going to draw the navel towards the spine and, if possible, hook the navel up towards the diaphragm just a little bit. As I said earlier, or perhaps I didn't say actually, the downward facing dog contains elements of both a forward bend in the lower body and a back bend in the upper body. And it's part of the strength that we would normally need for a back bend in the upper body that we're actually going to work on now. And to do this, we need to imagine initially that there's a piece of string tied to our right shoulder blade, and the piece of string is going to draw upwards as if it's lifting the shoulder blade towards the ceiling. And in theory, because our arm is attached to our shoulder blade, it will cause the arm to lift up a little bit and the hand to begin to peel away from the floor. And then breathing in, just replacing the hand to the mat. And then the left shoulder blade, as if a piece of string tied to the shoulder blade, lifting it up towards the ceiling, the arm following in the hand a little bit, and then inhaling, replacing. So as we're doing this, or even at the start, we need to let the shoulder blades be wide across the back, a wide placement in the back of the rib cage, and the shoulder blades as much as possible moving downwards in the direction of the sitting bones. So we should already feel a little bit of strength working in the upper back then, and then it's as if the shoulder blade is being picked up by a piece of string towards the ceiling, exhalation, and inhalation to return the hand to the mat, and exhalation, piece of string lifting the shoulder blade up, and inhalation to return to the mat. So let's just give it one more go to each side, exhalation and inhalation, exhalation and inhalation. And then we're going to imagine something similar as well in the lower body. So it's as if we've got a piece of string tied to the right hip, lifting the right hip up, and then of course, because the thigh is attached to the hip, a little bit the thigh lifts up and the knee peels away from the mat. And then on the other side as well, piece of string tied to the left hip, lifting it up towards the ceiling, and then a little bit as well, the thigh follows. Now the bandha strength is really important here. What we're trying to do now in working with the lower body is get this bandha strength to come back into play. Because when we're lifting up into the downward facing dog, we need primarily the weight of the pelvis to be supported by these core strength muscles. Often when we start to work with the hip moving so that the support of the thigh bone is coming out from under the pelvis, we actually just veer across. That's not going to train the core strength. So we need to try and stay as centered as we can, really go deep into the bandha to keep the spine in position. And as the right hip is activating, there'll be a tendency to lean towards the left side. So think in terms of gently pressing your rib cage back towards the right side. And that will just probably keep it centered. It won't actually send it to the right side. It will just keep it centered. And then on the left side, as you're working piece of string on the left hip, then just imagining that it's pulling it up, and then keep the chest moving over towards the left side so that you don't veer towards the right side. We're going to combine So it's going to be right shoulder blade with left hip, and then left shoulder blade with right hip. So the idea is that the piece of string is pulling the right shoulder blade towards the ceiling and the left hip towards the ceiling, a diagonal reaction, right arm, left leg. And then the piece of string is drawing the left shoulder blade towards the ceiling and the right hip towards the ceiling, diagonal action, left arm, right leg. So we just give that a couple of goes to each side. Exhalation on the effort and inhalation on the release. And now we're going to think about working both together. We need to this time just tuck the toes under. In fact, maybe we should just give the toes a little preliminary stretch. So tuck the toes under and lengthen back again. Just trying to give the backs of the feet a stretch. Now if that's too far, keep it more moderate. Stretching the feet gently. Got lots of little bones there. Don't want to disturb the patterns of the muscles and the bones before they're ready. So just gently stretching. And then again, we'll let the body come forwards. If we can, ideally coming forwards with our bandha already working. Opening the feet. You can relax them there like that a little bit. And then just double check the length. So stretching the tailbone back as if it's going to touch the wall behind. The crown of the head as if it's going to touch the wall in front. And in between the tailbone and the crown, let your spine really stretch and open. As we're ready again, coming forwards towards the all fours. See if you can already be using the bandha. Deep lift in the lower abdomen, navel pulling to the spine, so you're supported as you get here. Going to, again, just tuck the toes under. And this time we're going to have the shoulder blades wide and moving down the back and activate both shoulder blades. So it's as if we've got pieces of string lifting both shoulder blades towards the ceiling at the same time, and pieces of string on the back of both hips, lifting both hips towards the ceiling at the same time. And then possibly we might hover like this, breathing and coming back down. So again, shoulder blades wide, and it's as if we've got pieces of string tied to the shoulder blades, lifting them up towards the ceiling, pieces of string tied to the backs of the hips, as if lifting the hips towards the ceiling, hover. And what we're trying to do here is feel that it's the core strength, the lower abdominal strength that's working to support the weight of the hips and the legs. And that's ideally what we need as we try to lift the body weight up and back into Adho Mukha Svanasana. And at the same time as the core muscles through the bandha are working to support the pelvis, the upper back muscles around the shoulder blades, and we should feel a little bit of work here as well in the outside of the upper arm, the triceps, are working to support the upper back to keep the chest open, so that we'll be able to lengthen the muscles around the rib cage at the sides and the front, and move back, supporting the weight of our body, not in our arms primarily, but from out of the core and then through the legs as the heels would extend. So that was just to show why we're doing it and how we're doing it. Let's as well think about the shoulders in terms of how the shoulder joints need to rotate. So that's the strength that we need to be using through the upper back and shoulders, but we also going to need to position the angles on the shoulder joints so that we'll be able to move more easily and support the posture once we get there. And we just sort of do this in seated. You can stay in kneeling if it's comfortable. If it's not comfortable sitting on the floor, just hop up onto a block or cushion or any support that is handy. With the shoulder joints in the downward facing dog, we need to have an outward rotation through the shoulder joint, a rotation away from the midline of the body. However, at the radial joint in the forearm, we need to have a rotation inwards towards the midline of the body. And without this, it's very difficult to actually get the shoulders to lengthen as we stretch back and up into the downward dog. So we've been working to open the muscles around the rib cage and between the rib cage and the arms so that we can get this stretch. But we also need to, as we carry the weight back, facilitate that with the position on the joints. So we're going to work to rotate the shoulder joint outwards at the same time as keeping our shoulder blade positioned wide in the back of the rib cage and moving down the back of the rib cage. And then what can sometimes happen is that as the forearm rotates inwards, the shoulder joint comes with it. So we can just test this by holding the upper arm once we've got the shoulder joint to rotate outwards as we rotate the radial joint inwards. And in a sense, we'll know that we've got the right positions because the collarbones will be open, or the collarbone will be open, and we'll feel in this region, in the upper back, that there's quite a lot of strength stimulated. When we're in the downward dog, the hands need to be really stretched as well. And I'm just automatically doing that. But it's a quite useful part of the practice here as well to just begin to get that. Let's try it on the other side as well. So the arm coming up and then really looking for this rotation at the shoulder joint, which can be sometimes tricky to find because we tend to do this rotation a lot at the forearm, but the one at the shoulder joint less. So again, we can test it by having a sense that our shoulder blade is very much wide in the back of the rib cage and moving downwards, that the collarbone is open, lots of space between the ear and the shoulder. And then again, just to check that we're doing what we think we're doing, we can put the other hand onto the upper arm just to check that it's not turning inwards as the forearm turns inwards. So I give it another go on the side, shoulder joint rotating outwards, shoulder blade positioned down the back, and then rotating the forearm inwards, and we can stretch and open the hand at the same time. So of course in the downward facing dog we need both arms and shoulder joints doing the same thing at the same time. So we can bring the arms up like this, positioning the collarbones broad and open, both shoulder blades wide and sinking down the back, coming into this opening outwards through the shoulder joints, and then the rotation inwards through the forearms. And that's the position we need. So let's see if we can put all of these different elements, our stretching and lengthening through the backs of the legs, our supporting of the trunk of the body, the pelvis and the midsection with the bandha, the lengthening of the spine supported by the bandha, the structure through the upper back and the strength through the upper back in order to perform our Adho Mukha Svanasana posture. So we'll just set everything aside, and usually the practice begins from Shashankasana, the hare pose. Once again, ideally getting lots of space and length between the tailbone and the crown of the head, and already here as we're moving back, trying to reproduce that opening between the arms and the rib cage that we practiced earlier, holding the strap, lying on the back. Then as we're ready, with an inhalation, engaging the bandha and breathing in, coming through towards the all fours. So as we arrive in the all fours, ideally we already feel that the weight of the pelvis is supported by our deep lift at the base of the spine, the hollow in the lower abdomen, and the navel pulling to the spine. We let the collarbones be open and wide, the shoulder blades wide in the upper back and moving down the back. Let's tuck the toes under, activate the shoulder blades as if strings are pulling them towards the ceiling, activate the back of the hips as if the same, feel that the body's hovering here using the deep bandha strength. Stretch back away from your hands which are spread on the mat, keep all of the joints of the hands down, creating a long line from the fingertips through the wrists into the shoulder joints, back through the sides of the body into the sitting bones.
here. Again, renewing the navel, pulling to the spine, possibly hooking up towards the diaphragm. Lift in the lower abdomen. Get the strength in at the sides of the waist and the back of the waist. Let the ribs gather in at the sides of the ribs and the back of the ribs. Breastbone and spine can move together. Really reaching away from the hands. The knees can stay bent. In many respects, it looks a lot more like a dog stretching when they do. But if the legs are ready to lengthen, just let it happen by the heels sinking downwards and the sitting bones lifting upwards, being supported from beneath by your bandha. And then the breath, letting the breath flow. Let the breath dive into the depth of the chest. Pull it right through as if to your diaphragm. And with the exhalations, let the navel pull to the spine. Lower abdomen lifts up and back. Breathing. Let's see if we can hold a last round of the breath here. And then, as you're ready with an exhalation, letting the knees bend, coming back down towards the mat, sending the hips back and towards the heels, relaxing. So either in the hare pose again, or to give the shoulders more of a rest, coming into the child's pose, Pindasana. And sometimes in Pindasana we need to take the weight off the neck by just gently placing a block in underneath the forehead, or if the head hasn't got support, supporting the forehead with a block. We'll come back to a second practice of the downward dog in a moment, but at present just relaxing and letting go of that first practice. So as you're ready, just on an inhalation, rolling up and away from the child's pose. Sometimes it's the calves that are actually inhibiting the legs from stretching, and it's useful then to think in terms of possibly putting a block or a book underneath the heels so that the practice would be a bit more like this. You're here, and then as you're ready, coming back, and then you've just got a little bit of support underneath the heels. You might have to, as I did, just slightly adjust the positioning between the knees and the hands in order to be able to work with support underneath your heels. But it does definitely reduce the intensity that some people experience in the calf muscles in Adho Mukha Svanasana. It's not just the hamstrings that have to open, it's the calves as well. It can be, if we've got quite hot during the practice, that the hands are slipping because there's a little bit of sweat on them. And then I'd say really a single layer of fabric or a towel is possibly better. You could just put that onto your mat, make sure that it won't slip or slide, so that you've got this to absorb any sweat, so that you're not sliding and slipping in the same way potentially. But I'm not as warm as that at the moment, so it's not helpful, but it can be sometimes helpful, especially to some people. The hands are very key. When we're in the posture, if we let the hands lift up like this, then we reduce the amount of strength that's available to us in the shoulders and the upper back. And in fact, the strength work is going a lot more into the forearms. But for really the vast majority of us, the upper back has a lot more potential strength than the forearms. So keeping the whole hand down will help you to distribute strength more readily into the upper body. Just try to, as we practice again, return to that idea of the strength and the openness combining through the body in the Adho Mukha Svanasana.
And also this time we'll focus a little bit more on that sense of the spine lengthening directly from the tailbone towards the crown. And although we need to engage a little bit of strength around the waist and around the rib cage, at the same time we need to keep breadth in the shoulders and breadth in the pelvis so the spine is free to release forwards. We've got a lot of strength working within the bone structure, in the pelvis, and around the bone structure, in the waist and in the ribs, but we need to keep breath. If we are like this in the posture, sort of everything pulling into the centre, it's going to be impossible for the spine to lengthen. So we try to have both this openness, breadth across the shoulders and hips, as well as the strength behind us in the upper back, around the rib cage, into the abdomen, and in the fronts of the thighs really as well. Let's give it one more practice and then we'll relax into the frog pose. Again, lengthening the spine into the Shashankasana hair pose. We send the tailbone back and the crown of the head lengthening forwards. Ideally, here already engaging the bandha, so the lift in the lower abdomen and navel pulling to the spine, so that with the inhalation, coming through to the all fours with the bandha already in place. Letting the hands spread and open against the mat and really grounding the hands, although feeling already that you're lifting the weight of the shoulders and the upper back away from the hands with your shoulder blades activated, wide and down the back, strings pulling the shoulder blades towards the ceiling. Got this outward rotation in the shoulder joint, but the inward rotation at the forearms, so the insides of the elbows are definitely facing each other and not going outwards. Toes tucking under, and then the imaginary pieces of string on the back of the hips, bandha already working, pelvis hovers, and then keeping the shoulders opening outwards at the top and active from behind. We lengthen back, stretching the rib cage, opening from the fingertips through to the shoulder joint, back to the sitting bones. Keep the ribs working around the spine, the waist working around the spine, the bandha working in the lower abdomen and the midsection. And then just seeing if it's possible to find a working balance between the strength that you need here and the ease that you need. Letting the heels sink into the mat, letting the sitting bones float up into the air behind you, letting the front of the chest be open and long and free and the upper back working. The insides of the arms are lengthening into the thumbs and the index fingers, and the strength lifting up from the little fingers through the outsides of the arms into the shoulder blades. And there, feeling that the spine is able to receive the actions of the arms and the legs, that it's able to lengthen freely from the tailbone into the crown, and that your breath is really able to move here. Let your exhalations be long and free, and your inhalations just be deep and released right back into your diaphragm. Keep coming back to that working balance between strength and openness, seeing how you can find that balance and that union, the whole of the body working together in the posture. So a last round of the breath here. And then as you're ready, at the close of that exhalation, let's bring the knees back towards the mat. And we're going to come into the frog pose, as long as it's comfortable for the knees, the toes coming together, the knees moving outwards, and letting the sitting bones reach back as the spine lengthens forwards out of the hips, Mandukasana. Sometimes it's easier when we support the chest with a cushion or a pillow or a block. It just gives us a little bit of elevation. Sometimes we need that to find room for the nose, room for the breath. And sometimes it just enables us to enter the posture more easily if the stretch is otherwise too strong. If Mandukasana feels too strong, come back instead to the child, Pindasana.
making sure that the head and neck are comfortable and supported. Spending a few moments to experience the after effects that linger behind the practice of Adho Mukha Svanasana. Being aware of the energy within the breath and the quality of the energy within the breath. Perhaps an expansiveness within the breath. Being aware of the energy that lifts and rises behind the forehead. Being aware of the energy that lifts and rises through the back of the body, through the back of the chest, through the back of the hips. Acknowledging here any sense of stillness. Any sense of oneness that there may be. And again, gently as you're ready, just walking the hands back in and towards us, bringing the upper body back up out of either the frog or the child. Let the legs release and come forwards. I just allow the hip joints to release again here. If you're in the child, it might feel nice to let them open outwards. And it's good just to do something as well once we've come up from being down for a long time. Baddha Konasana. Could be that, again, with posture like this, we'll find that it's easier when we hop up onto something that gives the hips a little bit of elevation, and that will allow the legs to drop away. Ideally keeping the spine lengthened. You don't need to come deep, it can just be wherever it feels comfortable. And then again allowing the Baddha Konasana also to release. Let's finish with 3 rounds of the breath, just to, again, center our energy. So, inhalation. And an exhalation. Om Shanti Namaste. Well done, and I hope that you've enjoyed this practice of downward facing dog. It is a challenging posture in many ways, and it can feel quite tiring, especially I think when it is a practice in its own right, the way we've done it today. The good news though about the demands of the practice are that although we have to give up that immediate energy physically in our muscles in order to practice it, afterwards we seem to get a different quality of energy, a kind of a renewal, a regeneration of energy that comes in afterwards. And I hope that you're experiencing that with me if you've been following through this practice. Thank you for watching and hope to see you again soon.